Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to ET CFO Budget 2022 series. This is the fourth week and the fourth series of Budget 2022, and I have a power pack panel here today as well. And we are going to discuss what they're expecting from the finance minister on the 1st of February. But before that, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the ET CFO has launched this series almost a month back, and we are getting a great response from all of you. Many of our subscribers are actually looking forward to join this series, and they are expecting a lot of stuff. And in fact, I also received many suggestions from the people that we should in fact compile the suggestions which the CFOs have given till now and maybe send it to the finance minister. We'll try our best to compile all the suggestions and at least post it on a story, which we have already started doing. But let me tell you, once we start our session, if you have any questions to anyone, any of the speaker that we have today for next 1 hour, please, you can share these questions on any platform that you're watching, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, or on etcfo.com. Wherever you find any question, if you have any specific question, please share. So, as we are discussing various aspects of the budget 2022, it's going to be a tough job, obviously, for the finance minister, but at the same time, the industry is expecting a lot more from the finance minister, from ease of doing business to policy changes to incentivizing tax and so many things. So, we are going to discuss all this with the three gentlemen that I have with me, and allow me to introduce these top speakers that I have. My first speaker for the day today is Mr. Sandeep Modi, the CFO of Hindustan Zinc Limited. Sandeep, glad to have you. My next speaker is Mr. Ravi Vishwanath, the Group CFO, Quest Corp Limited. Ravi, glad to have you. And my next speaker is Mr. Ajit Deshmukh, the MD, Equarius Capital. Ajit, glad to have you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Amol, for having me.
And my next speaker is Mr. Ajit Deshmukh, the MD, Equarius Capital. Ajit, glad to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And
Thanks, Amol, for
let
having
me
me.
let me begin. Let me begin by asking a simple question to all of you first, and I will start with you, Sandeep. What is your wish list? What do you expect from the budget 2020? Let me begin by asking a simple question to all of you first, and I will start with you, Sandeep.
So, if I talk about from the budget, this budget should be a reforming budget. That's what we have been all seeing. The pandemic has been going on. The way we are seeing our GDP and every business is growing up. The demand is picking up. So, I expect, especially for the my mining sector, which contributes almost to the 2% of the GDP, specifically the disinvestment of the various exploration licenses, where the people can actually participate into the new companies and they can invest into the new this mining business. In the exploration kind of thing, where the private sectors are as of now not putting so much of money to making the ease of doing the business, ensuring the compliances which are putting us the businesses on the hold, or making something not so things which are complicated at this point of time in terms of various regulatory environment. So I expect this budget to ease of doing the business for the especially the mining and the businesses which are highly regulated, because these business India has a highly reserved in the various categories of the minerals. If I see for the Hindustan Zinc, they have a high reserves in the especially in the Rajasthan and nearby. If the ease of doing business can happen, royalty structure can be eased, the way the companies are being charged, and taxation reforms can be done. And in case of the new company setup, which happened in the new section insertion, 15% for the new company, if that can be eased down, it can add a lot of value. And lastly, I expect from this budget to be oriented to the renewable energy, so that India can achieve that target of net zero by 2070, and every corporate has to contribute into that. And that's how I focus that with local lot of focus fiscal incentive should be given to the businesses so that they can invest into this high pitch environment.
Okay, noted your point, Sandeep. I think meaningful one. Yes, I think the investments and in your sector specifically, mining, are very less, and if something can be done there, quite interesting things will happen for certainly. Ravi, let me come to you and take your perspective as your opening comments. Ravi, please go ahead. Ravi, let me come to
I
you and
think
take your perspective as your opening comments.
I think
Ravi, please go ahead.
from our perspective, there are a few things that need to be done. I mean, prima
Ravi,
facie,
let me come to you and take your perspective
the labor
as your
codes,
opening comments.
the four labor codes need to be need to be implemented. We've been talking about it for a while now. So I think the implementation has been delayed quite a bit. We would want the full labor code to be implemented forthwith. There has been some back and forth with the states. The rules need to be ironed out, and so some of these things have to be taken care of to ensure that there's minimal litigation as we go forward, and we're not in the same situation as what we are currently. The second and the most important part is, I would say, over the last couple of years, the inequality has actually widened in our country. Post the pandemic, not just in our country, I think it's all over the world. There must be something done by the government to ensure that this inequality, the gap actually is bridged to a large extent. It's not easy.
Ravi, just I wanted to stop you for a second. I think there is some noise. There is some audio disturbance. By any chance, have you put your tab on, the other tab, or is there any other loud, other product on? Is there any other device on? Audio disturbance. By any chance, have you put your tab on, the other tab, or is there any other loud, other product on? Is there any other device on? Audio disturbance. By any chance.
Let me just check 1 minute. Let me just check.
Yes, sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the disturbance. Let me shoot the same question to Ajit, and let me take perspective from Ajit. Ajit, I would like you to give your budget comments. What do you expect from the finance minister?
Sure, Amol. Thanks for getting us on the panel, first of all, and good afternoon to everyone. I think as investment bankers, we are essentially mirrors of the market, and my comments or my thoughts are essentially reflecting what we see, hearing from the market, and mirroring the thoughts. If I really break the budget, I think what we are expecting is more of a promise to deliver what was budgeted, rather than keeping the audience like us guessing whether targets will be met or not. I think that's the most important line that we as the market participants think about the budget this time. Yeah. If I then split the budget into various parts, which is taxation, which is the revenue part, direct and indirect. And then on the expenses, they're both revenue and capital type of expenses. I think on direct taxes, a lot of consumption, people should have direct slabs being increased and so on. But I think in the long term, we are fairly there in terms of the slab, and I think our opinion is we are okay on that. On indirect taxes, GST being in place, yes, there are some tweaks that small tweaks may be required in the whole situation and on the execution side. But otherwise, on indirect taxes with GST in place, we are there's hardly anything that is really expected on that situation also. Coming to the revenue side, I think the how shall I say it? Like I said in the beginning, the plan to be executed in terms of whether it may be divestment, privatization, and so on and so forth, rather than just talking about a 1 year time frame. Maybe it's time that we have a 4 or 5 years plan laid out, saying that this is how, let's say, bank privatization will happen, this is how mergers of banks will happen, and so on and so forth. So I think this time around, our expectation is more on execution, delivering the promise rather than making the newer and newer promises.
Okay, valid points, Ajit. I think delivering, I think what they decided already and not making huge promises. Glad to have you back, Ravi. Please go ahead.
I think So like I said, there's one ask from our industry, which is the manpower industry for a while now, which is the 4 labor codes to go live. This has been in the works for a very long time, and it's about time that the government takes it seriously and just gets on with the 4 labor codes. There's also another reality that I think authorities in the government should wake up to, which is the whole concept of employment today is not the same as what it used to be. There are multiple different kinds of employment that actually is happening today. You've got permanent, you've got gig, you've got contract, you've got apprentices. There are a host of other bilateral, bipartite, tripartite kind of arrangements. Uh, Everything should be recognized, in fact, well, and should be encouraged by the government, because it's not just a one size fits all kind of a scenario today. The third thing that I would want that I would want is a greater focus on education and healthcare in the budget. Our allocation for these two have been very minimal over the past many years, and I think and it's kind of showing and it's kind of beginning to show up. This is a time when I would think India can play the role of being the talent supplier to the world. With aging population across the world and everything, I think India can really take on the role of a talent supplier. And this is something the government should actually focus on. Be it skilling, be it apprenticeships, be it education, and so on. And lastly, like I said, the widening inequality should be addressed. This is not something that can be done immediately, but this is something that must be attended to on a war footing, because it can lead to serious problems going forward. These are the four areas that others have spoken about everything else. These are the four things that come to my mind at the top of me,
Right.
at the top of my mind recall.
I think very valid and meaningful thoughts from all of you. I think the area that you are representing, Ravi, is a very crucial aspect. In fact, if you look at a lot of data points these days, the job loss is far more critical in a lot of sectors actually, except those two three cream sectors. So thanks for sharing all these important insights. Now let me come back to you, Sandeep, and maybe we'll kind of try our best to deep dive into the segment. So when you spoke about the investments front, okay, what do you think government should do specifically to spur the investments to attract the foreign money? That they will come and try to dig the mines, trying to create some energy out of it, whether it's a renewable or some other. Try to take out the gold and silver, which will be beneficial for you and the country. What is it that need to be done?
Yeah, so I would suggest two, three things. I will talk what we expect from the government. So if you see, first of all, is the freedom of the exploration. If you see, especially in case of mining sector, these are like highly regulated, and government does the lot of exploration by the Geological Survey of India, and they allot the mines, and their speed, if you see, is not that much of fast as we can in the private sector. My first task is that freedom of the undertaking the exploration should be given to the private sector, and that opens for the private sector, and we can do exploration with the best of technology available globally, which Vedanta or Hindustan Zinc have been doing here. So that can be one ask. Similarly, the expediting the block auction, the way auctions are there are so many reserves are there, it can be auction. What government will get, if you see the structure of the tax in the mining industry, it is almost 50% of the whatever we earn go to the government. So if you see the highest rate of income tax, it is say 25 to 30% goes to government of India, and royalty ranges from 15 to 20%. So whatever we get, almost 50% go to the government. So that will also help the government to get their revenue higher. When we say the from the investment point of view, if you see the mining and metal industry are highly power intensive industry, and coal has been the major source of the power. The way we have to move to the renewable energy, if the indirect benefit can be given to that, the way investment allowance or accelerated depreciation, something has to be given, because the government has India prime minister has set an ambitious target of by 2070 net zero, and that's how the other corporates have also followed, and the Hindustan Zinc has also followed. What we want, we have to invest in the renewable energy. We have to invest rather than diesel operated vehicles. We have to invest in the battery operated vehicles. So Hindustan Zinc is also placed for the $1 billion investment. So why I'm pitching for here? If such kind of things, ESG, which is getting a buzzword as of now, and a lot of COP26 and other things are people focused about it. If somebody has to invest into this ESG, what is the fiscal incentive for that? Apart from that, I have set my goal for my own. There should be some fiscal incentive from the government of from this budget. So that is something for which I was talking, that that investment can help a lot to the government of India, the way or the state or the public or on the various sectors, it can have a cascading effect. Because when the metal and mining sector is especially a backbone of the sector, and given the rising commodity prices, which are the input commodity inflation, other things are happening, we expect a lot from government of India to ease the electricity duty, various charges. I will give you one simple example. One round the clock price of the power is 3 rupees per unit, which I can purchase from IEX, which is the Indian Energy Exchange. However, with so much taxes loaded, it lands us to me 7 rupees. So 4 rupees, the contribution is going to the government of India or the various states. So ease of doing business has to happen, because if the cost pressures remain high, we won't be able to survive in such, even the such kind of high LME environments are there. We won't be able to survive in such in the long term, and we also have to be remain the competitive the way other countries are taking the action. Given that other things, if we see the MMNDA Act, which happened in 2015, several mining leases were set to expire by March 20, and a lot of things can be done by Government of India by putting these things into the auction, and the 15% corporate tax rate can be given to the new mining player. And it should be like not my ask would be like not putting up just an old company like Hindustan, you got any company which is like more than 50 years in the industry. If they set up a new facility or new mine, so that should be also given the 15% corporate tax rate, which should not be only limited to a company. It should be only a new facility for this. And the third ask is about the coal related piece. So this coal related piece has to go down slowly to achieve the overall government's target. But at the same time, it cannot go so easily. We have to see a longer term view. So these are the few asks, and our ask would be from the overall point of view. I will give 1 more minute. I will take here the way. If you see our Hindustan Zinc produces almost 7.5 lakh ton of the zinc, and capture the 90% Indian market. Still, if we see 10 to 15% imports are happening. So why these imports are happening? Government should think over why we can't be a completely Atmanirbhar Bharat, and where the 29.5% is also held by Hindustan Zinc, Government of India into Hindustan Zinc. This can really help. The most of the imports are happening from the Korea and Japan at a zero duty, which is the FTA countries. So government should think over to increase the rate on from the 5% to 7.5%. This will be like something is basic as similar situation will be to the lead, where the secondary lead and other things are happening as a import. That can also help from the overall company's interest, protecting the interest and making the self-reliant Bharat. I expect the government to be considered of opening the base metal industry for the private sector by way of expedite disinvestment as well. So it will help us to go more for the market, having a more responsibility towards the shareholder, having the more responsibility towards the larger community of the investors, having a better market capitalization. Overall, this thing will be helping a lot for the metal and mining perspective, and which can increase. We believe that the metal and mining sector, mining sector almost contribute only a 1.75% to the total GDP. It can easily touch to the 5% or beyond 5% in the overall $5 trillion of economy if the government make it a ease of doing the business, simplification of the compliances burden which are there for the various kind of thing. There are Indian Bureau of Mines, there are DMG, there are various kind of verticals are there. We appreciate this is a highly regulated environment. This is the licenses given to us from the mother earth to be taken, but at the same time, ease of doing business will attract a lot of investment, and we are really excited that government should think over and consider these things into the budget.
uh, Detailed one, Sandeep. In fact, one by one, hard hitting points. Very well said, must say that. And I think what also matters here, even if they're not doing something very specific, even if they offer a clarity, in terms of this is can be done, this cannot be done. I think that's also helps a lot. Certainly in this kind of situations. So great point, Sandeep. Let me come to you, Ajit, and 2021 has been a booming time for a stock market in terms of the new companies. The primary market was a blockbuster hit, and I'm sure you must be advising a lot of companies. There are a lot of companies in the pipeline. When the foreign investors are investing in India, what are the major challenges that you see? Because at one side we see India has a great potential. The foreign investors are like standing outside the boundary with sacks of money, the boris of money wanted to bring to India. But there are a lot of challenges. So what is that you see that the finance minister should look at so that the money will come to India?
I think a lot already has been done because I think Sandeep also articulated some of the stuff specifically in that industry where we should be more friendly to the foreign investors and participative. Most of the investors, especially in the public market side, need clarity of things that are happening, like you said, Amol. So most of the foreign investors want that clarity, and with I must say that what happened with Vodafone and then how government reacted has gone down significantly well in terms of what things can happen, and the clarity that can be provided in terms of retrospective taxes and so on and so forth. So I think the type of assets that foreign investors are looking for now are also the intellectual property assets, like what Ravi mentioned, in terms of the education, in terms of making sure that we have assets in healthcare, education. Like, for example, the digital payments has been a great success in India. But before, maybe about 6 months ago, if I wanted to buy something in the public markets, which represented the digital payments growth, there was no asset that was available. And the whole ecosystem is slowly but surely building up, and foreigners are also wait. One part is, of course, they are waiting for government to give that continue the clarity and continue making sure that they deliver on the promise. But they're also waiting for private players to come to the market and access the market, and give a proxy to the new economy. Is there a proxy in the education sector? Not too many. Is there a proxy in the healthcare sector, in the public market? Not a whole lot, and stuff like that. Right? I mean, health tech, financial tech, and so on and so. So the waiting from foreign investors is also in terms of what the private sector can bring to the market and what type of assets that they can invest. From the government side, one of the points that Sandeep mentioned, and maybe slightly divergent from your question, Amol, is I completely subscribe to the fact that just the way NHAI has done great job in roads, we are waiting for a similar private participation in railways, and I think railways, in my opinion, limited knowledge, but in my opinion, railways is always a mass rapid transport EV that is already there, because 90% of the railways is probably electricity driven and not fossil fuel driven. So given that data point, I think a serious attention to private participation in railways, privatization of maybe stations, maybe tracks where you don't have to really transfer the ownership, but you can privatize the use of tracks, is something that will help a lot. And that's another area where participation from foreign investors can be huge in terms of taking that whole journey towards a more rapid transport type of situation.
Okay. Noted your points, Ajit. Yes, Ravi.
If I may just add to what actually Ajit is saying, one is there are very few capital markets in the world which are probably as attractive as India is today, actually. As far as to FPIs, there are not many markets, and while we have complained about our regulator being very, very strict lately, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because this is exactly what the investors want. I think our regulator, the Indian regulators have done a phenomenal job over the last 5 to 10 years in really improving the image of the Indian capital markets substantially. And what you're seeing today is probably like the effect of all the good work that they have done. So clearly, there's we've done a phenomenal job, and and the only way is actually way forward from here.
Great. I think meaningful one, Ravi, but I think now we have reached to a level we have to be far more progressive and modern than ever, because the way the digital evolution is happening, we can praise ourselves for, and praise the regulators for saving us from the 2008-2009 crisis. We did fairly well in 2020-2021 also. But the way the digital is growing, there has to be some decisions and some regulatory bodies. I'm sure those are in the pipeline, but it's time to be far more progressive. So Ravi, let me come back to you and ask you something. What you mentioned about labor codes, labor laws in your opening remarks. What is happening there according to you, and what government should do? Because at one side, if I could tell you, every CFO that I speak to today and I ask him what is the major challenge apart from policy and ease of doing business, is people. Managing people, handling people, obtaining people, getting people is a major challenge. On the other side, there are so many people who are jobless, right? And we have this, the labor law is coming. So what exactly is the major challenge that you see industries facing when hiring a labor, when hiring a skilled workers? What exactly is the challenge that you see there?
Okay, let me give you some numbers here. Okay, India has a workforce population of about 500 million people. Um, Almost 90% of this workforce works in the informal sector. So we have only 10% working in formal sector. The difference between formal and informal is just that the formal players play by the rule book, where they are provided minimum wages, leaves, social security benefits, and so on and so forth. The 90% do not enjoy these benefits today. Uh, and and companies like us, who are intermediaries, we call us contractors and so on. We play by the rule book, and so we've been a very important. We played a very important role over the last 15 years in the formalization of the workforce in our country. People use us. The informal employee uses us as a kind of a stepping board before he gets into a formal full-time employment with somebody else. So there's a lot to be done. So like I said, only 90% of our workforce is today. I mean, and only 10% of our workforce is today in the formal space. There is a move to take it. We have to increase that, and that increase can happen with the labor codes coming into play, with the authorities giving, monitoring that some of these things are actually implemented, not just in the letter of the law, but in the true spirit of the law as well. This is very, very important actually. A small company like us contributes so much to the national exchequer in the form of GST, etc. I think it's important the government treats staffing companies with a lot more respect than they currently do. They should not view us as somebody who just merely gets people. Getting people is very difficult today. And in this difficult scenario, we've been able to fill the. We've been able to just fill in the gaps, and actually fill in the gaps very admirably, I would say.
Great.
That's one part. Secondly, there is even today in our income tax law, the only deduction that exists is a deduction for job creation. The government must think of expanding the scope of this further and extending the. Of course, there is no sunset clause in the section currently, but they must think of making it a little more wider, and so that more and more companies actually get the benefit of it. How to do it is something that we can go back to the drawing board and we can probably get this done. The way I look at it is, there was a time when the IT industry in our country were given favorable concessions by the government in the form of taxes. And today, the reason why the Indian IT industry is head and shoulders above the rest of the world is because of is the fact that these companies reinvested the profits back into capacity building, capabilities, expansion, and so on. And today, India is in a very, very strong wicket all over the world.
Right.
A similar thing has to be done. A similar thing has to be done with, with the staffing companies as well. People will have to look at us as with a lot more respect than what we currently have. The world's largest employers today are staffing companies like Adeco, Manpower, Randstad. These are some of the larger companies in the world. We've got to start looking at staffing companies with a lot more respect than what's currently being provided to us. We are not mere labor contractors. We are talent suppliers today to the country. That's how one should look at it. The third area is actually, the way I want to talk about is the concept of skilling through apprenticeships. Actually, this is an area that has been long neglected. India woke up to it about 5-6 years ago. Thanks to the current government. I think we woke up, though a bit late, and we've done some pretty good stuff. I think a time has now come for us to weave apprenticeships with higher education, so that a person finishes their education with a course in doing an on-the-job training, which actually improves the skilling of people significantly. That's something that I'm sure the government is going to do a lot on this front. because the way I look at it, India will become the talent supplier to the world, and steps like improving an apprenticeship program, our higher education, and stuff like that will actually help us, get to our goals faster.
Mm.
There have been some simple asks from asks which have been pending with the government for many years now. Take for example, at the low wage levels, for example, you got to put more money in the hands of these employees. The compulsory confiscation of statutory deductions that the government has been doing over the last many years, the employee contribution, employer contribution, and so on, is
True.
eating away a lot of their hard-earned money at this stage. There was a proposal at one time, and it was even mentioned in the budget document of 2016, where they said employees drawing salary below a certain limit, the government wanted to make the employee contribution to provident fund optional. Never saw the light of the day after that, actually. These are things that will make it a little. We'll put more cash in the hands of these employees. Provident fund is important, but day-to-day survival is actually probably even more important. The fourth one was there was a talk about giving an alternative for employees to contribute into NPS as opposed to EPF. That should be given a lot more momentum now. Like I said earlier, we need a higher outlay in the budget for education, for the kind of education sector. India's spend on education. Thanks to the private sector, I think India is in such a good shape, but it's not enough today. The past 2 years have been very brutal for the education sector and for the students in particular. And I really feel bad for the students of the tier 2, tier 3 cities and villages. I really wonder what they would have learned in the last 2 years. And this is where a lot of focus must be spent by the government. The last area that I would like to touch upon is there's a lot of interest being shown in our country, by foreign investors over the last few years. Any provision that's going to make cross-border investments and holdings easier, both inward and outward, would be a welcome move, actually. Whether it's cross-border track between acquisitions, mergers, and so on. I think we've got to start moving in those directions, which will then really make it worthwhile for Indian companies to really go global even faster than what they are doing today.
Okay. Again, very important points that you raised, Ravi. Ajit, let me come to you and maybe take forward my last question that I asked you. But before that, if I look at the anecdotes, everybody's talking about the growth that India had shown. In last 2 years, we crossed 60,000 Sensex. Nifty 50 has also grown tremendously. We have already crossed 1 lakh crore of GST collection. And despite being many challenges, there are many companies have grown into many folds. Startups, fintechs, insurtech, so many areas are there. My question to you, Ajit, is when a lot of foreign investors are coming here, a lot of new companies are emerging, what is that will hold them back to be here only and not, okay, this is a good time, let's invest and, let's book the profit after year and, go back to their own countries. Because India is, like Ravi said, a talent supplier. Considering all these dynamics which fall into place, what is that we need now to let them stay here, let them grow here, so that economy will flourish like there is no tomorrow?
Sure. The answer is, of course, not simple for these things, because investors have a mindset of making money, and velocity of money is sometimes more important for them than just the net worth and so on and so forth. So it's always a very interesting question to say, how do I make sure that the investors stay, versus how do I make sure that a smaller investor first comes in, grows the company to the next level, and the larger investor comes in and gives an exit to the smaller investor, and that whole sort of phenomena keeps on happening, and we create the billion-dollar unicorns or what have you. I think some of the things that investors always have liked and want to continue to like is the predictability and this thing, and the fact that if needed, an exit, a reasonable exit is always possible. And everybody keeps on talking about ease of business, and we all want to strive for ease of business. But if I really look at it from a startup type of situation, ease of business has two parts. One is how easy it is to start a company. Is there a single window clearance? Can I get all the permissions, the PAN card, the TAN number, etc., in quick succession? It's also important. Let's look at the startup ecosystem for a minute, and I'll come to your investor question also related. 9 out of 10 startups fail. One startup succeeds and becomes the next Google or Facebook or what have you, right? Which essentially means that a significant majority of startup will have to close down. And when I talk about ease of business, it's very important to say that if I had a startup which didn't work, and the business didn't work, how easy it is to shut it down, and for me to move on and say, all right, this startup didn't work, that business didn't do well. I don't want it to become a zombie company where I have to keep on filing returns for next 10 years. I just want to shut it down, get out, and move on. I think therein lies some of the problem. A lot of foreign investors are also saying that it's very difficult once you are in the net in India. You're sort of entrenched into that system, and that fear comes from the fact that exit is very difficult. And when we work with private equity investors, and it's a very interesting concept. A lot of time, private equity investors, when they meet the promoter of a company, their first question is, how will I get exit from this company 3 years down the line, and how will I make money? Before they even understand what the company is, their question is, how will I make the exit? Will it be a IPO? Will it be a strategic sale, etc., etc.? And that's how their business is. If they get an answer to the exit, they're very willing to come, enter, and stay. So, like I said, it's a very interesting dichotomy, and so in the ease of business context, especially in the new age situation, a seamless exit and seamless, doing something new, trying something new out. If it didn't work, move on type of attitude is something that we will really have to digest, and as a society as well as the government, and provide that. And then you will see that even foreign investors will come in more and more towards startup, which is to your question, a more long-term investment, because as early as you come, you stay for a longer time before you can do a meaningful exit, and so on and so forth. So that's my two bits on the whole foreign investment situation.
Okay, good point, Ajit. We'll discuss that into detail, but I will also start taking few questions from the audience now. They have already started shooting questions, and this question is for Sandeep. Sandeep, the question is, you partly mentioned this, but this is a bit specific. What are the specific ways that government can boost exports in your sector to lower cost of production? We have seen that PLI scheme for specialty steels are now approved. What more do you think is needed?
So government can boost the sector for the exports from the say especially from the metal sector by introducing. They have already introduced the ROTAP, which was the remission of the duties scheme. Similar kind of schemes, if you see, the outlay can be increased. The X rate is there with the capping of the, because if I talk about the zinc or lead, it is like 1.5%. The increment can be from 1.5 to 2.5%. But I would focus more that the way we have to see the balance. If already a company is producing in India and he has to export rather than filling up the domestic market, especially I talk for my company, if Hindu Zinc, that's why I would say there's a balance. 15% is still getting imported. So how do we ensure that we first completely absorb the domestic market rather than export? Because the domestic market will not only give the opportunities and employment and the cascading effect in the economy, but also will help us as a company to grow within the India. So that is something I would focus upon. And remaining, whatever the excess capacities remain, which can be exported, that can be given through the schemes which has come to the ROTAP. And earlier it used to be a MEIS, merchandise incentive scheme. But how do you see, if you see the government has put up a certain budget allocation to these schemes, and because of that, even after accrual of these schemes amount, people are not able to realize. The government had to release the budget for getting this money into the pocket of the exporter. That is one thing which I would thought I will think I will like to answer in a manner that first fill up the gap which a company can fill up within the domestic, making the Atmanirbhar Bharat and making the self-reliant India, and ensuring that all the products which we make in India gets consumed in India, and the remaining capacity get exported if it makes the sense for the business.
Okay, okay. Noted that, Sandeep. Ravi, I will ask this question for you. I think participant is asking, revival of jobs is proving to be even more challenging. How are you reading this, and what are the expectations from budget for boosting employment in the country?
Uh, Revival of jobs is definitely challenging, more in the sense that we've seen that over the last many years. Um, you know, there has to be a massive push from the government, infrastructure spends, reviving the retail, the kind of retail sector. The BFSI sector has actually been doing reasonably well from a job creation perspective. um, the manufacturing actually, has to be there has to be a massive push for manufacturing, and one of the areas that needs a lot of attention is the MSME. The MSMEs have been the backbone of Indian economy for many years, and I don't think they are in a happy state currently. I think especially over the past few years, over the past 2 years, they have been impacted very badly, and they should be. I mean, the government does recognize the fact that the MSMEs have a very, very important role to play. It's going to be a combination of many, many things. Um, More importantly, also, I think uh, every state in our country has to create an environment that's conducive for job creation. I don't think many. I mean, there are probably a few states that are way ahead compared to the rest, but there has to be a kind of a standard playbook that states need to come up with to ensure that they are attracting investors to come and set up shop. Be it manufacturing, be it services, and so on. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done. So it's not just one or two things. The labor reforms that we spoke about, the four labor codes that are expected to be notified, would probably help the state governments in coming up with a policy that's going to create more jobs in the respective states. Because every state, I mean, uh, all of us know that labor is actually on the concurrent list in the constitution, and if it's in the concurrent list, it actually means that while the central government has the power to notify these laws, the state governments have the power to amend them to suit the requirements actually. So every state should therefore, depending upon what their strengths and weaknesses are, should come up with their own employment policy, or whatever that needs to be done. Education policy, employment policy is what every state needs to do that actually. And that's something that can be monitored by the center to ensure that every state, I mean, it's not enough if only a few states in our country kind of develop like what we are seeing today. Every state should be encouraged to come up with a policy that makes it attractive for investments to go in there.
Right. Thanks for that, Ravi. Ajit, this question is for you, and this question is about cross-border mergers. So, what specific steps Indian government should take in the budget, which will make cross-border mergers and acquisitions easy? And if you feel free to also, Ajit, I think add on this cross-border listings, which a lot of companies are talking about, and they have given presentations to the finance minister as well. Yeah. Ajit, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry. I think the second part is easier. I think the Honorable Finance Minister did talk about direct listing in overseas exchanges, and of course, implementation of what has been promised is what I started talking about. So making sure that that gets done is something. But I'm sure that is on cards, and government is sort of working on making sure that the cross-border listings are available in this thing. So I'll split the first question, which is cross-border mergers and acquisitions easier, in two parts. One is the inbound and one is the outbound, where the Indian companies are going and acquiring assets abroad, which is largely being seen in IT and IT services areas. Tech Mahindras and Infosys and TCS have done several acquisitions, and so has smaller companies. And then there are acquisitions where foreign companies have come and acquired assets here. I think in the first one, the ability to and I think I'm not really sure how government can play a role, but ability to have reasonable financing organized either through ECGC and so on and so forth in dollar terms, because we were part of few of the bids. And one of the reason why others companies from outside had an advantage is their financing was significantly at a lower cost than Indian companies. So I think that's an area which it needs to be seen. For the inbound mergers, I think just ease of business, ease of business, ease of business. When foreign companies come here and do operations, and Ravi has talked about it in terms of labor, starting from labor codes to if I want to exit the business, what do I do? I think that's a whole area where inbound cross-border M&A are getting affected by. And that's something which of course will take time, but things are so we have seen volumes increase in cross-border. Like in our small firm, last year we have done 4 times more cross-border M&A than year before that, and we hope to do more and more going forward. And that's the general story for most of the investment bankers. So we already see that happening, but more is yet to come.
Yes. Okay. Noted your points, Ajit. Sandeep, do you also want to, speak a little bit about the GST, the taxation regime, because I think that's a favorite topic of the CFOs, and we have seen a lot of changes, developments on the GST front also. So, any expectations that you are looking for specifically for your sector on the taxation side?
Yeah, so taxation side, I would have two, three things. One is like India has launched for the assessment scheme, which is the faceless. The faceless assessment, I believe that should be made optional. The companies, the kind of large size of us, which has a 5,000 to 6,000 crore of the taxation, which already paid through the tax in the direct tax kind of thing, they are bound to have certain kind of interpretation kind of issues, which can't be resolved through the faceless kind of assessment. So my ask would be that the company should be having the department should come certain guidelines at what kind of assessing should be having a faceless and what kind of thing should be the on the personal hearing kind of thing. Obviously, Supreme Court has also given us recently a ruling that faceless is cannot be just a mandatory; it has to be an alternative solution. So the show cause procedures and other thing has to be there. So, and department should also not think over working like an CID. Obviously, we all look after that. It's our responsibility as a company that how much we contribute and how much we do it. But ultimately, it's a department which takes a number of years for to settle the case. So I think that faceless thing, which I would suggest that should be made something recommendatory rather than mandatory for the kind of our size of the large size of the business. Secondly, coming to the taxation and the CSR expenditure. If you see the large corporates have spent crores of hundreds and crores of rupees into the COVID investments, and they have made a lot of COVID expenditure. If I talk for Hindustan Zinc, we spent almost 100 crore rupees in FY21, and during this year also in the second wave, we invested 50-60 crore rupees in the COVID. But still, if you see, these are not allowed as a deduction. So there has been a long demand about the industry that CSR expenditure, which has now made a 2% minimum profit has to be mandatory to be spent. So there's no logic why it should not be allowed as a deductible expenditure for the overall the company's point of view. So these are the two asks. Coming to the GST, I don't expect that there will be any major policy change from the GST perspective can be expected from this budget exercise. But however, it is not uncommon to see announcement linked to the implementation of key decisions taken at the GST Council meeting, which happened in the recently. So I think these are the three asks which I would talk about the overall. Fourth is one thing about the overall royalty structure which mining companies are having. If you see globally, the mining companies having a very different royalty structure. Here we have most of the, if you see the royalty says these are ad valorem rather than having a link to the profit or having a link to the revenue or after deduction of the expenditure. Obviously, there have been some of other reasons must have been there, but I think this is the right time where the government should look into how do they simplify these things and so that companies get more and more money to reinvest. So there can be a linkage that companies have to reinvest to create the job opportunities. Many things can be linked. so that just not to get a dividend by the shareholders. So I think these are the four things which I would talk about overall from the taxation overall point of view.
Okay, okay. Uh, Noted that. Ravi, let me come back to you and maybe ask you a very specific question. Obviously, we discussed the labor code, we discussed the current job situation, how important it is to create jobs. How can we actually kill the gap which is between the formal and the informal sector? What do you think that the government can do there? Because the gap is really really huge, right? So is there anything specific? I'm so sure that considering the major challenges happening in the economy and the country, perhaps government will not look at many aspects, but certain issues like this should have a long term strategy, because this will not happen in a day, right?
Correct.
So what do you think is the way to bridge the gap between the formal and informal sector, which is huge?
Correct. Yeah, actually, I mean, it's a very, very good question, Amol, in the sense that, I mean, if there's one thing that keeps us up at night, it's this question, which is how do we bridge this gap? And it's exactly what even we think about all the time as a company. Uh, I think, see, you'll have to understand, I mean, I would like to say, I would like to go on record and say that the current government, be it the first avatar or the current avatar, is focused on formalizing the economy big time. It started with demonetization. They followed it up quickly with GST rollouts. Now we've got now we've got the labor codes that are being implemented and so on. There are lots of things. I mean, so even in the GST, what the government did was just bring in everybody under the GST ambit first, and then slowly start tightening the screws around e-invoicing and ITC credits. I mean, only upon payment and so on. So all these things have happened only now. So, all these are actually steps towards formalizing an economy. It's not just a simple GST move. All these are steps which are long term in nature and which will formalize the economy at some point of time. The labor reforms will play a very important role, because what the labor reforms will do is, over time, mandate that all filing should be made automatic. We should be
Correct.
automated and so on. And at the same time, the penalties for non-compliances should be very, very stringent, because when you make a lot of things easy, but then you make the penalties for non-compliance very, very stringent. So over the next 5 years, we do believe
Hmm.
that 90% number will start coming down. It will come down to say 40-50%. We will still be, I mean, we will still be a 50% like informal, because that's where bulk of our population is. I mean, they're in agriculture, right? I mean, so you will have agricultural laborers who will still be in the informal sector to a large extent, but majority of all the non-agricultural workforce should start getting formalized actually.
Hmm.
So we are moving in the right direction. The pace,
Okay.
though, has been a little slow. But having said that, I think we are moving in the right direction. Actually,
Okay.
but then while we are on the topic of GST, actually here, Amol,
Yes.
the day GST went live, which is 1st July 17, we had about 75 lakh registered enterprises on the GST network.
Right.
That number today has grown to 1.2 crores actually.
Yes.
So what does it mean? It only means that the remaining 45 lakh enterprises added over the last 5 years, these are not new companies that have come on to that have been created over the last 5 years, or that have actually been incorporated. These were hitherto informal guys who are slowly coming on to the formal network actually.
Right.
So just to tell you that we are
Agree.
moving in the right direction, but we could probably, the government has to think in terms of what can we do to make it get faster. That's something that we should all work towards.
Yeah. We noted. I think the speed need to add there. Uh, uh, Ajit, let me ask you a bit different question. Since you come from investment and a pure finance background, you advise a lot of companies and you understand the pulse of the economy because everything is related to finance over there. Uh,
That's a tall claim.
so, so how much is the bandwidth of the finance minister when it comes to spending? Forget the policy and ease of doing business. Maybe they can. It's all about taking a bold decision. But when it comes to the spending, do you see the government really has the money to spend now? Because whatever they had to spend, they have already spent enough in last 2 years. Obviously, there are some good indicators, but what is your sense? What is your observation?
I think that's a very important point. I think we are constrained by resources. I mean, when even COVID happened, the amount of resources that got consumed on the government side in supporting, and they've done a fantastic job in handling COVID as a pandemic and so on and so forth, and it has caused a lot of this. So I think the resources are limited. Having said that, on the other side, we also think the speed of privatization, speed of divestment, speed of making sure some of the assets that government should probably get out of and monetize could release a lot of money for the government to spend on some of the, at least on the infrastructure side. So if you really look at the speed of operation on privatization on one side and speed of deployment on the infrastructure side, I think there is some work to be done on both, because the privatization has been talked around, and banks were to be privatized, merged, and so on and so forth, but we have not seen as much happening on that side. So to answer your question,
True.
are there assets which can release some of these funds so that they can be used for infrastructure building and so on? I think the answer is really yes, but it needs a lot of work to be done on the execution side of it.
Right, noted your point.
The Air India handing over to the Tatas is a great signal actually at this point of time, I would say.
Absolutely.
I mean, it just shows that the willing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We did one IPO about a couple of years ago of a great government company called MSTC, and has given great returns to investors also. And we've seen how Deepam almost helped in the entire process to make sure that the banker gets what they need to take the company public. So on one side, there are examples of things happening, like we mentioned, but a lot more to be done in that situation.
Okay. I think valid points. Not only just Air India, but I think LIC IPO is almost, they're closing the deadline, and it will come soon. That it looks like, I think that will clear a lot of disinvestment target for sure. So I will ask one common questions to all of you, but before that, quickly, Sandeep, do you want to take this question? I think the audience has asked this. This is a bit different.
Yeah.
But still, do you want to answer this on the EV sector? What
Yeah,
are
I can take
expectations
it.
from the government on EV sector? Please go
So
ahead.
the major expectation is related to the extending the EV sector. Seeing the growing demand of the EV and the importance of fulfilling the overall ESG targets for the mining and metal industry, the union budget should include the lowering the GST rates on the components of the raw materials, R&D or indigenous technology development. So if that makes cheaper than in the EV and even in the import duty structure for the EV vehicles, it can actually indirectly help the industry to invest into the EV kind of a business, which will help the overall business goals or the India goals of the by 2070 of the net zero. That is something I would like to answer.
Okay, sure. And I will take one last question to all of you, maybe 30 seconds, please, because we have left only with 2.5 minutes. Ravi, I will start with you. What would you not like to see in budget? What will make you unhappy in the budget? Oh, please unmute yourself, Ravi.
Giving the tax guys more powers to go after enterprises that are genuine is not probably a good sign in times like these, actually, because the GST. I mean, the GST, for example, have been really. I mean, some of the the compliance related matters, etc. I mean, they're pretty draconian, actually. I think even recently, Supreme Court has come down very heavily on one of the officers for doing something. I mean, which is not really what was expected. This is a new law. You have to be a little more amenable. Wait for it to settle down before anything else can be done at a very drastic level. I mean, I would say,
Sure.
we think of ease of doing business at the top of your mind every day when you come to work. Is what I would tell the government.
Agree, Ravi. Ajay.
The predictability, don't change. The train is running well, the plane is flying well. Don't change there too many things. We are on a great growth path. My request will be, don't change the path.
Oh, interesting. Sandeep.
So I would only, I think I would only supplement what Ajit has said. Let us keep the rhythm which is on by the government. And what I would is say that a lot of things can be asked from the government, but I think we can keep talking. But over the years, budgetary announcements has been also overshadowed by various sections, and it does not matter whether an announcement is made or not, so long as it made quickly. So I think what I would like, whatever they announce, it should have a very quick implementation so that we gain the results rather than just announce and which makes like a non give does not give any fruit in the near term. So because the budget comes every year and the next year budget when they will come, it won't be a full form budget. So this is the last full year budget. So I would expect that the government whatever announce, it has to be a quick implementation and kind of low hanging fruits catching.
Noted your points. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you so much, dear participants and ladies and gentlemen, for watching our show. Stay tuned to etcfo.com and subscribe to our newsletter, which we dispatch every day in the morning. It's absolutely free and which covers the CFO community in India in far more diligent manner. Also, stay tuned on the budget day and also the next Friday, which will be the 4th February, where we will discuss the post-budget live. So thank you, Sandeep, thank you, Ravi, and thank you, Ajit, for sharing the remarkable insights on this platform at etcfo.com and budget series. Thank you so much.